Education now, and Professor Jide Owoeye joins us now. He's the President, Nigerian Society for International Affairs, and also Pro-Chancellor of Lee City University. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you, and good morning.
But sometimes when we talk about education and what goes on in society, it looks as though one thing affects the other. And look at this bribery allegation involving these two persons, Femi Tadala and Farouk Lawan. It just seems to, some guests have said it affects the image of the country. What's your perspective on this?
Well, certainly the image of Nigeria has not gone this bad in terms of corruption, the attitude of public officers to their functions, and the attitude of those that you expect should be the ones that will provide oversight function to ensure that even when certain people are not doing the right thing, they are the ones that should call them to order. We are now in a situation in which it seems that nobody calls anybody to order, and I think that's very bad.
But corruption, when we talk about corruption, it's a very disturbing matter, because even in the education sector, it's rearing its ugly head. Look at the standards again. We're also talking about the dwindling standards in education, and so people ask, so if we're short in that sector, expect every other thing not to turn out well.
Well, part of the problem is that people are in school look up to their role models. It's very difficult.
Do we still have them?
We have role models, because it's very difficult to expect students to be learning. We are saying that they are in school not just to learn, not just for academic work. You also have to train them in terms of their moral conduct. You have to give them some, well, not indoctrination, but some kind of guidance as to how to behave in society, how to move Nigeria forward. But when they see the people that should be doing the role modeling behaving this way, it becomes very difficult for them to know what is right from what is wrong. And that is why you often find out that many of the companies now concentrate on Nigerians who get trained overseas, because they think these ones have not been tainted by these elements of corruption that we get to hear on TV, on radio every day. Because you are not yet in the society, you are still learning, but you are feeling the impact because of the way you are part of the society. You expect that certain things shouldn't happen, and those things are happening. It's really disappointing, and I'm thinking that the younger ones coming up, something is likely to give, because youthful people have a way of reacting to events, and it will get to a time when some of those things that happened and became known as the Arab Spring, these were youthful, things that were developed by young people. It could also happen here. This could be some of the consequences.
When you talk about role models, sometimes we have to even qualify role models now. Sometimes we forget that role models could also be bad role models as well as good role models. Irrespective of the kind of models people want to copy, upcoming young ones, and you get to see people like that on television, true or false, enmeshed in corruption, and we take it to our institutions of higher learning. What kind of attitude do we get as well from the support staff in the schools, the universities specifically speaking now, and the lecturers, the teachers? Do we get to copy anything from them? And if we do, what are the standards of those who teach these people before we can now say that they haven't done well?
Well, okay, look at the saga that's going on now. If you look at the way Otedola is handling the matter, it's quite different from the way Lawan is handling the matter. People expect a lot from Lawan being a legislature, and people expect that the way you react to events should be different from the way somebody who has no position in society should react to such an event. So if you're expecting certain role playing from people at a particular level, and the expectation becomes you are not getting what you expect, the tendency is for people to begin to see role model in other areas rather than the ones in their country. They begin to see like what was happening in the 70s. They begin to look at other sectors for to come and deliver the society. You know, they will study societies that have gone through this. They will look at how people came up and started calling the shot, to the extent that you may have something moving towards a revolution and so on and so forth. So what is happening now is we are getting to the brink. And it is most likely that if something does not happen, we may not come back from the brink. It may lead to some other things that we don't
That's going to be serious.
How are the schools like as we speak? What kind of people, what kind of teaching do they get, so that when they come out, we can now say, because when we talk about spring, that could be in any kind of guise. It could be from the education sector, and we say we have to develop that sector, and people have been complaining that, well, we have a fallen standard already. How can we get it revived so that when those new set of people come out, we have a new set of leaders who will take us to that plane we want?
Well, I don't quite agree that the standards have fallen so much. We are experimenting with all kinds of things in the last few years. And the role of government in the education sector, especially the higher education sector, will appear to be getting more and more into areas in which you don't expect government to involve itself. If, for example, the people that are in charge of the society, you are getting disappointed about how the society is being run, and so that does not need to affect the education sector. The education sector should be able to operate in such a way that it will produce the kind of people we want to replace those who are there now. But when you are having so much interference, because now what we are seeing is federal government gets so much involved in aspects of education that ordinarily should not concern the federal government.
For instance, would you name some of these areas?
Well, we were on TV to watch the federal government distributing books to primary school students. Well, this is a federal system. When you take the role out of the hands of those who should play the roles, like the local government, the state government, you now put them in a situation in which they keep on looking up to the federal government and they stop doing what they're supposed to do. To the extent that education really is supposed to be family affair. It should be personal to people. People should be able to sit down and decide, this is the kind of education that I want for my children. And now that we have several choices, Nigerians have reasons to be able to choose the education they want, but now everything seems to be that, look, this is the policy. This is the number of time you must spend at this level of education. This is the number you must spend at that level of education. Irrespective of the fact that society, the larger society, international society, education is not moving that way. Education is becoming more and more things that are left to individuals to decide.
No,
but we are now having more of politics of education than issues of education being dealt with.
But as much as possible, the government has a role. You don't think the government has a role to play in terms of certain, say, guidelines, even though there are many choices?
Yes, government has a role to play, but the role of government, as you said, is to provide the guidelines.
Isn't that where policy comes in?
No. You see, when you say policy, at this level, there's a minister there now, new policy. By the time you change that minister, another one comes, a new blueprint, a new educational summit. All these policies, somersaults, indicate that we are not helping the school system at all. To the extent that, if you look at it, many of the schools we have now, especially the private schools, at the non-tertiary level, many of them are doing so well. And in fact, they could match the standards in any world-class schools outside this country. It is because the impact of interference on those schools is far less than the impact of interference on those at the tertiary level. Because you find out that at those levels there are initiatives in terms of curriculum. You know, parents prefer their students to go through certain curriculum. They find a school that maybe it's British curriculum, maybe it's American, maybe it's Nigerian, or maybe it's a mismatch of any of these. These are happening at the level of at the non-tertiary
Primary and
level,
secondary.
because there is a lot of initiative, and you don't see government breathing down those institutions.
Yeah, but you
So
know,
they can mold those who are coming up.
when you
Will-
were, sorry to interrupt
Yes.
you, but when you were talking about universities or maybe schools being, preparatory grounds for breeding people or molding people that we intend to replace, put back in society,
Yes.
a host of people will also tell you that, say, schools, for instance, those, especially at the tertiary level,
Yes.
are microcosms of society. Sometimes they reflect what we see in society. Do you agree with that?
Well, certainly, but you see, there's a level at which institutions should be allowed to grow and be self-correcting. When you say government gives policy, it should be very general. It should still give rooms for a lot of initiatives, so that it is when you have initiative that you can grow people who can reform society. Because those who are there already are not telling those who are in school that we are good role models. If they are good role models, we won't be having all these scandals. With all these scandals going on, it doesn't seem as if anybody is there to correct, who could actually say that we could correct the young ones that are coming up. Because with what audacious attempt do you want to make to correct people who are going wrong?
So
when you yourself are behaving the way we are seeing everything in the newspapers every day.
So how then can education successfully contribute to correcting this anomaly that we have? Because incidentally, he used to be chairman House Committee on Education.
Yes.
So when politicians are also directly involved with policies and running education, are we in a situation that we can't help them?
Well, a lot of things, as we said, are not going right in education. And here's somebody who's been chairman House Committee on Education. They have oversight function, which ordinarily should have assisted education to move forward. But people are more interested in those areas that involve exchange of money, oversight functions that has to do with aspects of society where so much money is involved, to the extent that they now neglect what should be their primary function as chairman of House Committee on Education. Because I haven't seen anything that has been done to assist the school system, but they are more interested in those areas where a lot of money are involved. So that's a major problem. So at the end of the day, those who will correct these ills will have to be from inside the school systems themselves. As they say, when others are losing their heads, you keep yours. Many of the students who are coming out now, I want to believe that they are not likely to get into the society and behave exactly like these people who are leading us now. Because the thinking is quite different. The ICT environment, the learning environment has improved now, and people are beginning to ask questions that were not asked before. And when young people start asking questions, I think it shows that something is likely to change.
What's this magic with private tertiary institutions?
Yes.
The assurance people get that when you get in there, you'll be coming out at the aspiration of that particular program. We say this because even we understand that some people being sponsored by the federal government are being taken to some of those private universities.
Yeah. Well, are they really private universities? Well,
what makes them private or not? Or what name should we call them?
Well, private in the sense that we classify our universities into those owned by federal government, those owned by states, those owned by private organizations. But in the past, private universities were really private. But these days, there is too much interference, from outside. That
How do you mean outside?
Yeah, from the Federal Ministry of Education, especially the Nigerian Universities Commission.
As regulators, anyway.
Pardon?
As regulators.
Yes, as regulators. But we have some of the best universities in the United States, and you don't have such bodies breathing down on the system.
How do you mean?
You see, we should necessarily allow the market, to regulate these institutions. These institutions are self-regulating. But you find out that these days there is so much drum beating about universities, to the extent that issues that are should be a matter between the universities and their regulatory bodies are now like household words.
Which specific item? I mean, which specific incident could you cite as interference on the part of NUC?
Well, because NUC is not supposed to give timetable to tell universities when you should resume, when you should close, the hours of teaching, where you can teach in the evening, or you can teach in the during the weekend, and so on and so forth. I think schools.
What about the suspension of the part-time programs?
Well, I think the suspension of part-time program was explained sometimes on this said by a professor from NUC, and he did explain it very well, that what they meant is not as if they are just asking people who depend on part-time program to forget about it, that they just want to ensure that they correct some anomalies, because there are anomalies anyway, because some of the universities are taking too much than they can handle. When you have so many students in part-time program, you have to think about the time of the lecturers that are going to teach them. You have to think about the facilities.
One would think that, an instance like that, the institutions should be self-correcting, but that's not been the case. And until the intervention of the NUC, it didn't look like anything was...
No, that's what I said, that the professor explained it quite well. The earlier announcement gave us the impression that NUC is just clamping down, that, look, there will be nothing like part-time program for some time. But when the professor came, he explained it much better, that they just wanted to correct a few things. Because at the end of the day, people will not go to a school where quality has been so affected that people are not getting what they go to school to get.
But in a society that is certificate crazy, isn't that what we've been saying?
Yeah, you see, that's the more reason why I'm saying that the university, people who call the university ivory towers, they have a reason for calling them ivory towers. There should be an element of autonomy, in the university system. If you are complaining that people are seeing the universities as selling degrees, certificate conscious, it is because of this same drum beating. In the past, it was not like that. Now, we are hearing things like some universities are doing illegal programs. For God's sake, how can a university be doing illegal academic programs? Universities are not supposed to teach people towards certificates. Universities are supposed to create a learning environment. Teachers and students are supposed to be involved in all areas of knowledge where they can benefit by teaching each other, doing research, and some output to society. It doesn't mean that everything you do in a university should lead to a degree. It is when it has to lead to a degree certificate, as you are talking about, that I think the NUC should be involved. Okay, but we shouldn't say that we want to limit what they do in the university to what we think they should be doing.
All right. So
because learning should be infinite at that level. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a university.